And then every day, you'll be walking through, you've got a great turnout, and I know enthusiasm, I know this is your first kind of formal meeting since reorganization, so I was trying to do no one, not to do my back to anyone. Although you're probably the least interested.
No, she actually wanted to come to hear it, you guys.
Oh, good, I'm glad. You remind me, I didn't know where to start. I heard June talk about the budget, and I was like, oh my God, it's almost that time. We're going through our process. I won't get into that, maybe not just yet. But budget, the concept, the thoughts, and not somewhat unpleasant thoughts as to where we are with state budgets and how they impact what I like to call a somewhat sacred partnership between levels of government, local and state, certainly is part of the topic. But I can't help to start with a little softer topic when I see that you have, well, I have 3 children, and it just reminds me, when I have one who's in high school. He is 16 years old, just got his driver's license. I have one that just graduated from UConn. This will segue into a little bit about me prior to my public service. My daughter just graduated from UConn, and she's going through, you probably know this, I'm sure individuals in this room know better than me. There's a process if you want to become a PA, that you have to do so many volunteer hours. Anybody know how that works? Anyway, she's doing that process now at a doctor's office and hopes to go on to do that. I have a middle child, our son, is at a small college in upstate New York. I don't know what you did, but he tells me he's majoring in baseball because they gave him a few bucks to go to school. And I just come out with a degree and go from there. So I kind of take, we all have a lot of hats in life, but it's kind of nice to be able to start with one that I think is probably most important if you've had the role and responsibility to be a parent, and I'm a father, and I think that's probably the top job. But I am mayor of Bridgeport. There's 2 sections or 3 sections to this, so I'm gonna start chronologically. And I even thought of my public service before I first got elected, but I think starting with getting elected will take us back far enough. If you're as old as I am, I go back to the early 90s when I saw Bridgeport in crisis. I was a young attorney at the time. I come from a large family of siblings. There's 8 kids in my family, 8 within 10 years, and we talk about education, we had 6 of us either in college or basic college or law school at one time, so I understand the challenges my parents must have went through trying to make sure we got our education. When I came out, I practiced with my dad and his brothers for a while, until my brothers, who were all younger than me, joined our law practice. But then I wanted to get into public service. My family had moved to a small town, Easton, Connecticut. You probably never heard of it. Anybody ever hear of Easton? I saw the hands in Bridgeport. You ever been to Easton? All right, it's one of the smallest towns, 3-acre zoning, blah, blah, blah. So, I guess because my grandfather came to this country as a fruit peddler, my dad always carried that, and he had a little farm up there. My kids and nephews and nieces still man the Christmas tree farm there every year between November, actually Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I have a little bit of that. But I moved back to Bridgeport after my family, as a matter of choice. I thought if I was going to get involved and try and make a difference, no disrespect to Easton, but I thought the more dramatic impact, if I had any value at all, if I thought I had any brains where I could apply them, was in Bridgeport. So I did. I moved back. I ran for mayor. I lost, and that was in 1989. For the young people here, just don't do the math. Then the mayor got, we were elected a Republican. When Democrats fight sometimes, so we got to remember at the end of this thing, the end of this whole thing, whether it's for state senate or for governor, we got to come together, because when Democrats fight, Republicans win, right? And when we missed them, we just saw what happened. So we had a Republican mayor, and she put the city literally in bankruptcy. She filed for municipal bankruptcy. There were projected, hundreds of millions of dollars deficits, and so I'm in the middle of the campaign. She files for bankruptcy. They stopped for a moment, cash the city paychecks, garbage is piling up on the street. Major businesses are announcing they're moving out of town. And the story goes on and on. Police manning levels were at the lowest levels, and crime was spiraling out of control. So in the midst of that, I took over. I did what I thought were the difficult but right decisions at that time, and probably didn't make a lot of friends initially. But I will tell you that the takeaway was that we took the city out of bankruptcy. I made major commitments both in the area of public safety and in making tough decisions to put the city back on sound financial ground. We had suspended junk bond ratings. We couldn't even borrow money. And so fast forward, we were able to, for the next 10 years, not only balance our budgets, what turned out to be more than just modest surpluses, held the line on taxes for 10 years in a row. Added 100 police officers, saw public safety through community policing and even with after-school programs for young people. We saw our crime levels drop to what was that time probably the lowest level we'd seen in decades. Was able to galvanize strength from our business community, tear down dilapidated former empty warehouses and public housing, and built a thing called the first kind of regional attraction for families to come back into Bridgeport for a long time, called Harbor Yard with the Bluefish. Anybody heard of the Bluefish? We had them for 20 years, our first minor league baseball team. And then next to it, a year or two later, we built a 10,000-seat arena called Webster Bank Arena now. We brought in a minor league hockey team, Bridgeport Sound Tigers. They still play there today. And down, if you continue to drive up I-95 this direction, just slightly further, we began one of the largest waterfront development projects in the state, originally dubbed and continue to be dubbed, called Steel Point, where Bass Pro is. Everybody know where Bass Pro is? And you'll see steel going up next to that. Now will be waterfront housing. There's 200 boat slips. They just won't keep a chapter and verse on it, but ultimately would be hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe topping out at close to $1 billion in waterfront development at that site as well. Look at, so I've painted some real positives, created a lot of jobs in the interim. Had almost $1 billion school reconstruction program. We rebuilt most of the high schools and began that process. First, on the cities, footnote, more than a footnote. Cities are always work in progress. There's always more that can be done. We can always raise hands here and say, what about this? What about what's your percentage of students that are going on to college and how come it's not high? We can go on and on. There are always challenges. And there's also things that I did that were not positive. I made some terrible mistakes. Some of you might know. I resigned from office. I left public service. I was convicted, and I went through a very difficult time, and owned up when I came home, owned up publicly, and literally went to church, if some of you ever followed the story. And when I came home, there was no grandiose thoughts about new careers or anything. It's a tough road back, and I know this now, and tried to, in part, and digress here a little bit, create second chances for other individuals who had less in the way of friends and family and wherewithal who've been away. But when I came home, my focus was just putting my life back in order, understanding lessons learned, and wondering whether or not I just wanted to kind of put my life together with my 3 children and kind of move forward. But I found that back in Bridgeport, I've been gone for a while, not a lot of good stuff had really been happening. And there were a lot of people when I went back to we've done a family scholarship program for Bridgeport High School seniors every year, and we continued that program even when I wasn't around. And I went back, and people said, Joe, would you consider thinking about getting back and running again? And I really had to go through it, certainly, as you might imagine, pretty serious self-analysis. One, was this right for me? 2, would anybody even consider giving a second chance after everything had been through? But I was convinced, and frankly, the litmus test, and I started with my children, at the end of the day, was the end of it was the people of the city, would they vote for me? But the first step was my children, my youngest son, a 16-year-old, who taught me how, as much as it is knocking on doors as it was with traditional politics, now it's Facebook and online, and brought me up to speed on that, on-the-job training. He said, Dad, if you can do good, if you can help Bridgeport again, you should consider doing it. So he jumped in, taught me the new stuff. I remembered the old stuff, which was talking to people, communicating with people, letting them know you care, and reminding them that we could do better, and if given an opportunity. And by the way, is it such a far-fetched concept to allow someone a second chance who really wants to make a difference? So I'll fast forward. I did all the stuff that I hope that you'll do in your campaigns, whether you're running for state senate, whether you participate in a statewide campaign for me or for someone else, and I encourage you to do it. But went door to door, and I learned, and the first time I did it when I was in my early 30s, we walked door to door and we knocked. This time we ran door to door, literally. We would go, one guy would go up, we'd go to the next door, we'd knock, we'd say, talk to people. I would talk to them like this and say, look, yes, if there was a question, we'd talk through it. And I had, if it was younger people, frankly, there was a residual with their parents who had seen their neighborhoods where dirt hadn't turned before, or had seen something positive. And that residual positive, frankly, was the opportunity that allowed them to say, yeah, let's give Joe a second chance. I took on, by the way, I didn't go after Republican. I went at, it was a Democratic primary. It was a well-positioned incumbent. And we did it by knocking on doors and getting out a higher turnout by energizing voters, a higher turnout than Bridgeport had seen in its recent history. And it wasn't your traditional, we would call it prime voters. We were well beyond the prime voter base. We registered new voters. And we won, I think we shocked anybody who kind of before that day talked about what conventional wisdom was in politics. And they tell you, you can read the textbooks about what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. And I tell you right now, as I stand here today, someone who was reelected after being convicted, that conventional wisdom's out the door. It's about you, and it's about you, and it's about me, and it's about a commitment to public service, and it's about wanting to do the right thing and realizing that there's no perfect candidate. And somebody that if you may have not followed, there was an extreme amount of coverage when I announced. Not because I'm anything, but because of the controversy, right? Press loves controversy. So up front, I just said, look, I'm not a perfect candidate. But I can tell you this, there's nobody who's thinking of running on either side that's got more experience with the challenges that face the state of Connecticut right now, and what I like to call the sacred partnership between the state, our local government, and all of the 3.5 million citizens. Balanced budgets took a city from bankruptcy, moved it forward, have created jobs, even now this second time. When I went back and said, elect me, it wasn't just, elect me because I'm a nice guy. I'm sorry, I'm crowding here a little bit. But I made a commitment on a number of fronts that I could make a difference in people's lives again in a positive way. One of them was job creation, commitment to things like education, the environment. But also for me, I thought there was a level of accountability and transparency that needed to be added to that. And so I'd like to share with you that I've held true on those commitments locally. And on top of that, I think we've now got, even more so than my first almost 12 years in office, we've got more economic development, job growth in the last 2 years, and I'll give you a couple examples, than the city has seen in decades. So I told you I'm not young anymore, but my parents, I'm blessed, my parents are still alive. They probably won't, my mom, I can't tell you her age, my dad's 90, so she's a little young. Women, especially my mom. But she raves about downtown Bridgeport when she was a kid. And she says, you don't understand, Joe, what it was like to go downtown Bridgeport and the sidewalks are crowded, and these theaters, they call it the Poli and Majestic Theaters. They were the centerpiece where you went when you were kids. And of course, they probably started out as vaudeville, and then they went on and became movie theaters. Well, they were boxed, closed for 20 years. We've now, instead of seeing a city, again, work in progress, so no claim miracles here. But when we see major companies leaving, like GE taking their corporate headquarters out of, that's not even a city, out of a suburban Fairfield, 2 miles from where I live, and moving to an urban center in Massachusetts. You see Aetna, hopefully they're staying now, and talking about leaving, or Lexion talking. We're bringing in a New York developer who's not only going to redo our theaters, who's going to couple it with over $400 million of investment downtown. Going to rebuild a whole section of our, what I call North Main Street. So the arena and the ballpark, when you drive through over here, the other end of our Main Street down here will now see 2 towering buildings. Water, overlook the water. They'll be the 2 tallest buildings in Bridgeport, slightly taller than People's Bank. There should be 4 buildings in all, but those will be the 2 towers. They'll redo the theaters to its original grandeur, donate one back to either the city or the nonprofit, or a nonprofit that we designate, so that we'll have arts in it. I want to make it a center for the arts for our district, not just for the city, but when you get into regional, what's going to attract regional opportunities, that's one of them. Right down the road, for those of you that are environmentally conscious, and I like to think that I am too, and our city is an example of that. I think probably one in the Northeast more than others. We are ending what is the last coal burning plant in the state of Connecticut. So if you're, again, I age myself, but if you remember the Sooty 6 and the Filthy 5, anybody remember? Well, now we've got the singular last coal burning plants on Bridgeport's waterfront. So if you can vision this, and if you drive through, I'd ask you to remember some of this. You're going to see the Steel Point project going up. Footnote: you may or may not see MGM next door, right? They want to spend $675 million It creates 7,000 jobs. We can talk about that if it happens or not. But across where that stack is, that white and red stack, that's commissioned to be decommissioned, to be shut down under proposal. They're building a new 500, they're investing in New Jersey company, PSEG, an energy company, gas, and it'll be 385 megawatts, $550 million of investment in the city in that project alone. When you come in from Fairfield, if you can kind of follow me visually, you know, Fairfield is very, you know, I spent half my summers in Fairfield, so it's a beautiful town. We have empty factories. Those are being redone now, restored and made into warehouse studio apartments. It's the first phase of it's $120 million. The first phase. The second phase will put it over $250 million. It's by a developer. I don't need to give his names, but more importantly, it's backed by AFL-CIO pension fund money, and they're looking for more places to invest, not only in Bridgeport but elsewhere. So there's opportunities that are being created where there were former empty factories, former empty power plants. That'll end up being probably the next best development site I like to see on the northeastern seaboard. So we're moving the city ahead. But where we are as a state, and I don't know how much time you want to give me, but and where we are as a party are two things that I want to touch on. Okay? Tender topics. We're not exactly on top of our game as a state. I've never seen it this bad. This past session, and I've been up, you know, biting my nails, staff late at night. If you're in government and you're worried about balancing budgets, forget about the capital for a minute. We're just trying to get through. There was a point in time we were talking about laying off teachers mid-year, right? I mean, is there going to be a follow-through commitment on ECS? We didn't know. This is not the blame. I'm not in the blame game. I've been at this too long. I've taken my own lumps, so I know it's tough. And we've got some courageous Democrats up there that have done a wonderful job. But it is what it is, and it's got to be fixed, or we're going to be going through this year after year after year. And I don't come with, you know, grandiose plans or silver bullets. I know some of the answers. I've been through it all. I've restructured pensions. I've restructured healthcare plans. As I said, I took the city from what was projected multi-million-dollar deficits to not only junk bond ratings to A ratings and rebuild schools. So there's some would say some element of understanding of how to solve and address some of the challenges that we have. It's not going to be taxing or cutting our way out of it. Much of it's going to be a commitment to an atmosphere that has job growth, focused job growth, if we can get to that point, with hopefully people that are smarter at least than me, in part. And then as a party, I think we've got to take a deep breath. And we've got to realize that, you know, we blinked, and we got what we got in the White House. And I'll say the adjectives or adverbs or whatever the right term is, because some of them might be expletives, and inappropriately so. Because real people in our state, in this town, and in my city, and elsewhere are getting hurt. And whether it's direct or it's indirect, certainly we've got the courage and the firewall from our federal delegation. But the second line of that defense, if I can use that term, is Democratic leadership in Connecticut, in our House, in our Senate, in our governor's office, in all our constitutional offices. And that's kind of where the ball sits right now. And we're kind of like out there, and you know, we're the ones between now and whether it's the convention, if you want to use that as a discussion, or the primary, or November, that is going to make a difference. Many have marched, I'm sure. I was in Hartford for the Women's March, I think it was last week, and the energy's still here. Let's just say, whether it's energy from women, as you know, as we've seen, I think more dramatically, or just Democrats in general, men and women, who are saying, you know what, we can't let that happen again. We care about too many things. There's too many things unite us, and we can make a difference. I think we can, despite the fact that we're probably not held in high esteem as Democrats right now because we're kind of in charge. I think we can continue to lead Connecticut if we do it right, and if we all get energized, like the energy I feel in this room, like I've seen in other town committees. So I'm gonna just drop off with kind of an interesting point. I'd ask you to, if you want to ask questions, ask me. You can have other candidates come in. Do what you're doing, what you started by doing today, and get involved in, if you will, in the Senate campaign, and get involved in one of the statewide election campaigns. If it's mine, I'd love to have you get involved. But if somebody else comes in here and you feel more that they're more of the person that you think is best aligned with you or lead Connecticut, get involved in their campaign. That doesn't bother, we're all Democrats. And the better each of us do, the we'll make each other better through this primary process. And we're gonna come out, and we're gonna make sure, I hope, at the end of the day, as my town chairman says, we're all gonna be together, because we have to be. There's too much at stake. So I thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit, to share with you a little bit of my history, and to ask you to kind of really think about this. Many or some of you be delegates to the convention, but over and above that, it's gonna be getting people out in every city and town in Connecticut to make a difference. I'm sure there's a lot more I left out, but if you ask questions, I might remember some stuff.
Thank you very much.